I didn't believe Bruce Lee was as good as he is in his films. So he hit me and I fell onto the sofa with millions of people watching it.
Prior to Bruce Lee, martial arts were mystical, ritualistic, and hidden away in the dark corners of culture. Then arrived a bolt of lightning of a man who didn't merely alter the game, he blew the doors off reality. Every anecdote regarding Bruce Lee is a myth, too incredible to believe, too cinematic to believe. But the more you look, the more you find, most of them are true. It's about distinguishing fact from fiction and bringing out the wildest Bruce Lee stories the world suspected, until the film cameras started rolling. The one-inch punch that shattered physics occurred in front of a sold-out audience in Long Beach, 1964. A man was blocking Bruce Lee, arms crossed, self-satisfied, eager to be unimpressed. Bruce did not instruct him to step back, did not tell him to tense harder. He just held his hand up, set his knuckles against the man's chest, and waited. There was an inch between their bodies. Then he hit him. There was no build-up, no transfer of weight that anyone could detect. Just a flash of motion and the man shot backward, slamming into a chair 6 feet away. The audience was silent. What they had just seen wasn't a parlor trick. It was raw energy being transferred with the precision of a sniper's bullet. Joe Rogan later recounted on his own podcast, that one-inch punch sent a guy flying like he got hit with a shotgun. It wasn't hyperbole. Several years on, Stanford researchers examined footage and discovered something even more remarkable. Bruce wasn't just using his arm. His whole body was one unit. Force began from the ground, by way of his legs, twisted around his hips, burst through his shoulder, and out his fist. All within that 1 inch of travel. Bruce produced more than 1,500 newtons of force, plenty sufficient to fracture ribs. Skeptics attempted to recreate it. Martial artists from all over the world tested to reproduce his style. Some came close. None came close to accomplishing it. For it wasn't merely a matter of mechanics. It was a matter of control, timing, and years of conditioning so severe that Bruce's very body became a finely crafted weapon. It was the moment when a myth became a man and a man a legend. This wasn't performance. This was evidence. The one-inch punch wasn't a feat of martial arts. It was a statement. That power didn't require size, that strength didn't require distance, and that what appeared impossible was at times merely misunderstood. Without this scene on camera, many would still assume it was an overblown tale, a tall one told between dojo mats. It was captured, though. And it was real. Bruce remained standing afterwards, patiently, without celebration, without boasts. He merely bowed. Because for him, such power was not for display, it was for function. The crowd, which had been raucous before, were now awed. They did not applaud immediately. They were attempting to comprehend what they were witnessing. It appeared to be a conjuring trick, but conjuring does not blacken ribs. Conjuring does not knock around trained fighters. Only Bruce Lee could do that. And if the one-inch punch was science fiction come true, what followed broke even more rules about what the human frame was capable of withstanding. Because if you thought Bruce Lee's power stopped at punches, wait until you learn how he prepared for them. Picture a man goes to the ground, quietly sets his hands down on the ground with only 2 fingers of each set on the ground, and begins doing push-ups. Not 1. Not 10. But hundreds. Without breaking a sweat. Without quivering a muscle. While talking philosophy. That was Bruce Lee. 2-finger push-ups were not a party trick. They were an addiction. Every finger sustained more than 40 pounds of live, moving weight. There was no room for error. Off by a millimeter in balance, and he could break his own fingers. But Bruce did not only do them. He constructed his body around them. His fingertips turned to iron. And his mastery over his muscles came close to being unnatural. Training partner Bob Wall once explained, he could talk to you while doing them, like it was nothing. That's because for Bruce, these weren't exercises. They were lessons. Each repetition conditioned precision, endurance, and the sort of internal focus most people never reach in a lifetime. His fingers weren't merely powerful, they were surgical tools, able to find pressure points or break boards with precise accuracy. This wasn't recorded through fuzzy anecdotes. It was recorded. Confirmed. You can still see footage of Bruce doing two-finger push-ups off the ground like it's the most natural thing in the world. And this wasn't even his peak workout. It was warm-up. The appetizer. The actual training came afterwards. Physicians have attempted to describe how it was even possible. Bruce's bone density was off the charts. His tendons had become hypertrophied through repeated stress. His pain threshold, honed after years of banging his limbs off hard objects, was out of sight. But none of that accounts for the sheer beauty with which he did it. His body didn't just defy gravity, it worked with it. Redirected it. Employed it as a partner rather than a force to battle against. Everyone assumes that strength is determined by how much you lift. But Bruce Lee demonstrated that it's not just about how much force you possess, but also how accurately you can regulate that power. His fingers were not merely trained. They were tempered. Decades of squeezing them into sand, then rock, then steel pellets hardened them like concrete. But he never lost delicacy. He could still touch a student's shoulder without harming them, or, by mistake, dislocate it if he was not careful, which indeed occurred. But he was not trying to make an impression. He was pushing the boundaries of what the human being could do. And somehow, he just kept discovering that he did not have any. And just when you thought the physical stunts couldn't get any more ridiculous, what do you do with a man who is technically too fast for cameras to record? What do you do when a man is so fast, your cameras perceive him as stationary? In 1966, during a shoot of The Green Hornet, there was an issue. Director William Dozier and the crew were filming fight scenes, but something was always going wrong with the footage. Bruce Lee would punch. The stuntman would fly away. But when they reviewed the movie on film, it seemed like Bruce hadn't moved a muscle. The cameras just didn't capture the motion. The crew initially thought it was a technical breakdown. They ran every piece of equipment through a test. All was good. Then they saw the truth. Bruce Lee's punching was beyond the speed of the cameras. Film was shot at 24 frames per second, yet Bruce's fist moved in less than a single frame. In real life, his action was not visible. This wasn't something that happened in a myth. This occurred before a whole Hollywood crew. Fight choreographer Bob Wall timed one of Bruce's punches at 0.05 of a second from initiation to contact. That's quicker than the average human reaction time, and that means most humans couldn't even blink before being hit. So the producers did the unthinkable. They pleaded with Bruce to slow down. To make his punches televisual. Pretend to tell the greatest living martial artist that he must move slower because technology at the time literally could not keep up with him. Bruce was not happy about it, but he respected it. He had to pace himself, not for the fight itself, but for the viewers. So when you watch The Green Hornet now and see Kato moving at a blur speed, remember this, that was Bruce restraining himself. And yet even as he held back, he was redefining the guidelines on how action could be presented on film. His movements were economical, clean, and downright explosive. But if you pay attention, you will see something odd. He never wasted emotion. There was no showy flash. Every swing, every parry, every angle was executed for maximum impact with minimal movement. He wasn't merely quick, he was economical to the point of becoming invisible. Subsequent camera work on Enter the Dragon and other movies was done with specially developed methods simply to keep pace with his speed. Multiple cameras, increased frame rates, and slow motion were employed by directors to ensure that audiences would be able to follow what was going on. Not because they were attempting to dramatize the action but because otherwise it would literally be too quick to watch. Contemporary UFC fighters still break down his tapes frame by frame. They dissect his footwork, his economy of movement, his timing. Years later, he's still instructing new generations of fighters how to move smarter, not harder. But Bruce didn't stop with camera-breaking speed. Because after pushing the boundaries of what could be captured by film, he chose to push something else: bones. If shattering the speed of film was one height, what Bruce did afterwards demonstrated that his strength wasn't simply quick, it was deadly. And in 1960, that reality struck like a bolt of lightning in an unoccupied YMCA handball court in Seattle. This wasn't on tape. There was no audience. Just witnesses bound to secrecy and silence that would be shattered by the wet crunch of bone under stress. The adversary was Yoichi Nakachi, a well-respected Japanese black belt with many years of training and no-nonsense credentials. Word had circulated of a teenage Chinese kung fu teacher teaching Americans. In those days, martial arts was tribal, and Nakachi didn't take kindly to what he saw as an upstart breaking tradition. He wanted to humble Bruce. Make an example. What he got instead was an 11-second masterclass in controlled destruction. The moment the match began, Nakachi charged. Bruce slipped the first punch, ducked the second, and countered with a kick that shattered Nakachi's nose. Witnesses later said blood sprayed across the court. Then Bruce stepped forward, his footwork perfect, and delivered a fist straight into Nakachi's skull. The sound was sickening. One observer described it as, like a coconut being cracked open on a rock. Nakachi dropped instantly, unconscious. A fractured skull. Broken nose. Severe concussion. The fight was over before it ever really began. There are no photos. No film. Only a few of the people who witnessed what occurred and one small, haunting description in Bruce Lee's personal diary. He described what happened that night not with pride, but with agony. Because Bruce didn't just defeat someone in a fight. He had nearly killed a man. That experience haunted him. It altered him. Linda Lee went on to say later, that was the day Bruce understood he was dangerous in a way he didn't yet comprehend. And that realization changed everything. From then on, Bruce committed his training not only to power, but to control. He began to question traditional forms. About why so many of the martial arts were rooted in ritual, not in reality. About why the most important thing wasn't victory but restraint. He didn't want to be a weapon. He wanted to be a master of one. That's when he began experimenting. Studying boxing, fencing, wrestling. Testing every movement, every stance, every tactic against real opponents. Nakachi's defeat wasn't just a win. It was the spark that led Bruce to create his own fighting philosophy. Not Wing Chun. Not Kung Fu. Not karate. Something quicker, keener, more personal. Something that did not depend on tradition but truth. Years later, when Bruce invented Jeet Kune Do, the style that would revolutionize martial arts for decades, he wasn't attempting to be better. He was attempting to ensure what went down in that YMCA never happened again unless absolutely necessary.